After Mrs. Klein came in and gave her initial statement to Officer Unsinger, who would be responsible for looking into the allegations or the facts surrounding that particular, her complaint? I mean, she made a complaint.
Yeah, the case was assigned to me, and then that would be me that would.
So from the initial complaint on, her initial complaint on, there were no other investigators involved?
No.
Okay. Do you know where Officer Unsinger's initial report, notes, any of that information that was taken the day that Mrs. Klein came in, her statement, do you know where any of that original material is?
As in
other words, she filled out an initial complaint with Officer Unsinger.
Okay.
And I assumed that, I shouldn't assume, would she have signed it, sworn to it?
She would have, yeah, filed
Okay.
out a written statement.
Do you know where that's at? Because that's never been provided to defense through discovery.
Okay. It should be part of the case back.
Her initial statement from February 18th, 2007, or 2018, or February 16th, 2000. Okay.
That would have gone out with initial discovery, Mr. Boling. It's one written page.
Okay.
I'm sorry, two.
Okay.
Are you saying you never got that copy?
I went through piece by piece and clicked on every piece of discovery that's been entered in the case to me as a defendant.
Do you have the field property receipt?
The field property receipt?
Well, I was just going to say in reference to probably the order in which the packet was seized, because it was literally scanned in.
I'll check, but I'll make a note to get that, to look at that again. As I've read through the discovery more times than I can tell, and I have wondered where that's been.
Not that I want to interrupt you or cause any delay, but did you want to review her written statement?
Oh yeah, I would love to. Thank you. Yes, I've never been provided this. And I think if we review the discovery, everyone will have an opportunity. Thank you. How long have you been a police officer for?
20, a little over 20 years.
Okay. And is there any special training or special training requirements that you go through to become a detective at the Longwood Police Department?
Not to become a detective.
How long have you been a detective? When were you promoted to detective? Or how long, approximately?
About 13 years.
Long time.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's perspective, but I think it's a long time. I called the Longwood Police Department on June 24th, 2019, and spoke to whoever answers the phone. Do they keep records of those calls on non-emergency lines?
I don't know.
Do you know? Okay. When I called, I asked to speak to the officer in charge of internal affairs for Longwood Police Department, and they transferred my call to you. Are you the internal affairs officer for LPD?
No.
Is there an internal affairs officer at Longwood Police Department?
Yes.
Do you know who that is?
Bruce likely? I think there's a couple that are qualified for that position,
But nobody that's specifically like, that's just, I mean, I know it's a small department, so it's like 1,000 police officers.
Lieutenant Bruce, I would say, would.
Somebody higher up has the responsibility of it. Okay. So when you went through your initial training, I know it was 20 years ago, after that, do you go through like refresher training or, you know, any other required continuing certifications like an insurance salesperson or somebody else has to maintain their stuff?
Yes, there is.
There's ongoing training.
Yes.
And when you get that training, did they teach you how to write complete and accurate reports?
That's not typically one of those things that,
Okay. But after writing them for 20 years, you've got a pretty good feel of what belongs in a report?
sure.
Okay. How important, as a detective, how important is it that the reports that not just you, but that any police officer writes concerning a crime, how important is it that they're accurate?
Very important.
Okay.
That's it.
It's not just, oh, I should say it's not. Is it just a bunch of paperwork that you have to go through that really doesn't make much of a difference, or is what's actually on the paper very important?
I would say very important.
Okay. When you are filling out a police report, I don't know if they call it incident report or police report, up in the terminology I'm using, are you supposed to include exculpatory evidence in the police report if you're aware of it? Meaning evidence that shows that that person may not have done whatever what they're accused of.
If that exists, yes.
If that exists, are you required to put it in there, or you just highlight the things that need to be put in there? The guy says, if you're questioning somebody and he says, I didn't do it, or I have an alibi, I was with my mom, are you supposed to include defendant claims he has an alibi and was with his mom in the report? Right. So even if you haven't had a chance to investigate it, if there's appears to be exculpatory evidence, it should be included in the report.
Yes.
Okay. Is it okay or acceptable for a police report to include speculative statements on the part of the officer?
Yeah, they shouldn't know.
Should just be facts.
Yes.
Shouldn't be like their opinion or. What's the difference between a police report or an incident report and a probable cause affidavit? Which, if you don't mind, I'll refer that to as a PCA from here on out, so I have to keep saying it.
Probable cause affidavit is just the charging affidavit that we submit to the state for official filing of charges. Okay.
So, and then the police report is more comprehensive? Which one would you consider to be more comprehensive?
The police report.
The police report?
Entire report, yes.
Okay. And the police report typically submitted, is it accurate to say the police report's typically submitted in support of the probable cause affidavit?
Yes.
Okay. And historically speaking, respectfully, do you find that you make a lot of critical mistakes on police reports or probable cause affidavits when you're filling them out?
No, obviously I try not to, but
Right.
it happens.
From time to time?
Sure.
Do you recall in the past times that you've made critical mistakes that have been that have very negatively affected the ability to prosecute a case? Like where you wrote down that, let's say that there was a shooting and you wrote down that the guy had a pistol and he really had a shotgun. That's a pretty big difference, right?
Yes, that example would be a big difference.
Right.
If you're
So
asking me to recollect a specific thing
No.
like that, I don't.
no, I'm just saying is in your history as a detective, do you recall in cases that you've investigated in probable cause affidavits or police reports that you've written down, do you recall times where you have made what you would consider significant errors that have negatively impacted a case?
I can't think of any specific.
Right, so it's not a habit.
Right.
Right. Notice that
Certainly try not to.
they don't come back to you and be like, listen, you said the guy was driving a green car and he was actually driving a blue car and you wrote down the wrong color. You wouldn't say, the color doesn't really matter, he was driving a car.
Right.
Okay. So, it'd be redundant, but accuracy within a probable cause affidavit, is that important?
Sure.
Because that's what they use to actually charge somebody and arrest them.
Yes.
So it's important that the information be as accurate as possible.
Yes.
Okay. And in your experience as a detective, why is it important that all of the details are correct?
Well, for the reason you just said, it is the charging affidavit. That's the information that's used to decide that the state makes a deciding factor as to whether to proceed with the charges.
Okay. And that's right. That's what establishes the probable cause, right? So each thing. So obviously, fair to say we agree that when someone's accused of a crime, it's important to get the details right.
Yes.
Okay. Is it fair to say that time is a important factor in part of a crime, when it happened, or location where it happened, the date that it happened? Are those important?
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody says it happened at 6 o'clock in the morning and it really happened at 6 o'clock at night, that's a big difference because the person may not have been there. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into the difference between having the wrong time.
Correct.
And especially, and is there factors that obviously I think would be, but I don't want to say it, is with the wrong date. They said Bob was there on Friday, and turns out Friday he was out sailing on a ocean cruise. Bob couldn't have been there on Friday. So the day that the crime occurred is important.
Yes.
So when you wrote the original, or I'm sorry, you say you didn't take the original report from Mrs. Klein. It was Officer Unsinger. His original report written in the margin, is the part that was written in the margin, did you have a chance to, or I'm sorry, maybe Ms. Sacco can show you what I'm talking about. There's where it says the handwritten statement by Mrs. Klein.
Written statement. I didn't review that this morning. I don't have a copy of it.
She just showed it to me. There's a portion in the margin where it has a date written.
Are you referring to Officer Brandon Unsinger's narrative, or are you now referring to Laura Klein's written statement?
Laura Klein's written statement. I did not know that Officer Unsinger had a narrative. I never received Officer Unsinger's narrative.
What are you referring to?
I'm referring to Laura Klein's handwritten criminal complaint, the one that you handed me.
Yes.
And there's a spot in the margin, I would say on the right-hand side, that says November 2nd.
No, at the end, there's her personal information at the top.
Okay.
And then at the end is the date in which she signed it and was sworn to.
About halfway down and on the right-hand side, do you see where it says 11/02/16? Or am I not reading that correctly from here? Give me my fire project. Right here. That's what I'm talking about. Where it says 11/02/16.
Mm-hmm.
That's the date of the alleged offense?
Yes.
Okay.
That's documented in the initial report.
Documented in his initial report,
Yes.
in Mr. Unsinger's initial report. Okay. And when he submitted those documents to you, the ones that the state has, did you then submit that packet? Is that what goes to the state? Is that what you submitted would have submitted to the state attorney's office?
Yes.
Which would have been Mrs. Klein's written statement, Mr. Unsinger's narrative,
Yes.
and then any other investigatory materials that they listed. But first, they would have come to you first, and then you would have looked at whatever it was, and then you would have conducted the investigation.
Yes.
Is that going to refer to the June 25th, 2019 date that I came in and spoke with you? I'm sorry, June 26th interview. In our interview, you stated that there was a significant delay between the date of the alleged crime and when Mrs. Klein filed her police report with the Longwood Police Department.
Yes.
Do Do you recall what caused that delay?
I think what I tried to explain to you is the fact that she was under the assumption that legal action was being taken by Liberty Law, and obviously that takes time, so she was allowing that to take place before she realized that there was nothing being done. So that was the time frame between the November and when she came in February of 18 to report it.
Okay. And during the interview, I informed you that Attorney Jonathan Bull at the time had been representing me as my attorney. He was actually retained as an attorney. And at the time, you were unaware of that.
Yes, I was unaware of
that. Did that surprise you when I told you that? When I said he was representing me, I believe your response was something like, no, that was the officer, or that was the lawyer you were impersonating. And I said, no, detective, he actually was representing me, and that is the purpose why I was actually there at his office. I was there on an appointment to meet him. You seemed a little taken back. That would be my interpretation. That's what I'm asking. Did that kind of surprise you?
I don't recall.
Okay.
What my reaction was at that time.
That's fair. During the interview, I also informed you that I had never worked at Liberty Law. I wasn't an employee. I hadn't worked there. And I asked you if you were aware of that, and you said that you were not aware of that either. Did that seem to surprise you at all?
Once again, I don't remember what my
Okay.
reaction to that was.
Were you under the impression throughout your investigation that I had been an employee of Liberty Law, and that as an employee of Liberty Law, not as a person represented by Jonathan Bull, that I had been involved in some sort of conspiracy with other employees at Liberty Law to defraud the public or people or victims?
I was not aware of any of that.
No, that's what originally what the charge was for organized fraud. It was that myself, Sandra Lentz, and Tom
Right.
McGill together ran a scheme of organized fraud. Organized fraud is a scheme. It's not an individual act. So
At that time, I did not know what your connection with those other individuals was.
right, but you were not aware that I didn't work there. Were you aware that both of them worked there as employees?
I don't recall if it was spelled out in the initial report.
So Thomas McGill and Sandra Lentz had a purpose for being at Liberty Law. Their purpose was they were employees. They worked at Liberty Law. It was Jonathan Bull's law firm. They either, you say, worked at it, worked with him, did whatever. One of them was an office manager. The other one was a paralegal. They were his employees.
Right.
I was not his employee, which is what I was informing you in that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, did you know I was not his employee? And you said, no, I didn't know that, which led me to believe that you may have been under the impression that I was his employee, working with the other employees to do whatever organized scheme we had been accused of.
I didn't make that connection at that time. No. That you were an employee or a friend of theirs or
Okay,
whatever.
fair enough. I asked you if you were aware that I had never received any payment or any compensation of any sort from Liberty Law, from Thomas McGill, from Sandra Lentz, and you responded that you were not aware of that. Someone that is committing a crime of theft. Again, we go back to motive, which would be for me to collect money. Was anyone ever present you with evidence that I had ever received any portion of the money or compensation or quid pro quo or any of that related to Mrs. Klein's retainer?
I didn't have any specific information that you had received money, no.
Okay. Did it just, obviously, you've been an investigator, you've been a police officer for 20 years, so you have a very good feel about things. Mm-hmm. Would it strike you as odd if somebody would participate in a crime for no compensation?
People have motivations to do different things for different reasons.
Fair enough. I just didn't know if it was common for someone to engage in criminal activity with no intent to receive remuneration or payment for or compensation for their involvement in participating in the crime.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that question?
Um,
Or restate it? I'm sorry.
I was saying, is it seem odd to him that someone would participate, based on his history of being an officer, that someone would actively participate in a criminal act with no anticipation of getting paid or receiving anything, whether it be quid pro quo or whether it be money or any type of compensation, just to go participate in a crime and then walk away and never speak to the people again, never receive money, never get payment, nothing. I was just asking, would that seem strange? I mean, typically people, like we talked about motive, somebody's typically motivated to get money or get revenge or to do something for the crime instead of just participating in a crime for nothing. Do you find that, did I explain it better? I'm sorry.
I'm just basically you're just asking, does he find it odd?
Yeah, or historically, I mean, the benefit we have is he has 20 years of experience, 13 as a detective. He's investigated probably hundreds, if not thousands of cases.
And my understanding, Detective Patrick, is your response was people do a lot of odd things.
Well, people do things for different reasons.
People do things, sorry.
Typically when people are engaged in a criminal act to derive money from another person, and do they typically get the money or get part of the money? I mean, I really know how to ask the question. How do you consider your memory? Consider your memory pretty good?
Decent.
Decent?
Not the greatest, but decent.
Right. Now, obviously, a decent memory is important if you're an investigator because you try to remember facts and things people tell you and you'll be able to recall them, et cetera, et cetera.
Obviously rely on written document for a lot of things because I don't remember everything.
I know exactly how you feel, sir. Do you recall the first time that you ever heard Roderic Boling, ever heard my name?
This case?
Would have been in this case?
Yes.
Okay. It was directly in relation to this case. You'd never heard it before that from another officer or the Longwood Police Department, or no one had ever discussed it before?
No.
With you? Okay. You weren't aware that or when I spoke to you, I asked you if you were aware that I had been previously falsely arrested by the Longwood Police Department.
I was not aware of that.
And you said you were not aware of that. When you began investigating me, do you recall if you were investigating just my act, or if you were investigating my act as part of Mr. McGill and Mrs. Lentz committing an act? When Mrs. Klein came in and said that whatever she wrote in her statement, he took the notes, you began your investigation. When you began your investigation, was your investigation specifically just about me, or was your investigation about the people that she met with? Do you recall?
It involved all
All three of us?
Right.
Okay. And I assume when you get that information, you run a background check on the three people?
No.
You don't?
I didn't do a background check on them.
So
That's
you
not
would
a common thing.
to know whether the person had ever been convicted of anything, were a convicted felon, had ever been arrested by the Longwood Police Department, had a history of arrest?
I don't do that on a regular basis at all.
Okay. So nobody in relation, do you remember the first time you ran an NCIC or an FCIC on me? Or have you ever?
I don't recall that I ever have.
Okay. Would you know if it wasn't you, do you know if Brandon Unsinger ran an NCIC or an FCIC?
I don't know. I wouldn't know that.
Do you know, is that standard practice for Longwood? When somebody comes in and makes a complaint about an individual, do they then go and run a background, arrest history, background check?
Typically, we only run NCIC when we're in contact with the person that.
Okay. Oh, so when somebody comes in and says, John Doe committed this crime against me, they take the written complaint, do they go to the computer, look up John Doe and say, oh, look, this guy's been arrested here, this guy did this, we've arrested him before? I mean, I assume they look the person up.
Sure. Yeah, but that would be separate from an NCIC.
Okay. Would that be an FCIC?
No, that would be just a local, through our reporting system, which is called CAFE.
CAFE. Okay. Now, is that a standard practice that they run? That they obviously have to find something out about the guy.
Sure.
Right? They don't go to Ben Verified and see what he has to say. They go to CAFE.
That would be one source.
One asset that they use, right? One source that they use. Okay. And do you know what the other ones are?
I don't know if they even used any others.
Do you know what the other ones are that the Longwood Police Department uses on a regular basis to pull up people's information and look at them? If they don't run an NCIC or an FCIC, CAFE is one. Is there any other mechanisms?
finder.
Okay.
David would be the motor vehicle.
Right, I know David. I've got the David reports. So when Officer Unsinger, is it fair to assume that that is a standard operating procedure of the Longwood Police Department when they have a criminal complaint against an individual? They look the individual up on one of these, whether it be cafe or finder or whatever.
I don't know that he did that, so you're asking me to predict or
Right.
go back and.
As an investigator, would you consider that a prudent, thorough process to find out if the guy has an arrest history, a criminal history, if he's wanted? If somebody just made a criminal complaint.
But criminal history it's not something that I pull on everybody that I work
No, I'm
with.
saying not you, but in other words, if Mr. Unsinger goes and puts into the cafe, Roderic, Boling, date of birth, like the complaint was, it pops up and there would be a picture and a lot of information on me. Previous arrest history of the Longwood Police Department, because that's in cafe, all the things that are in cafe.
Sure.
So, and I don't want to assume, is it standard procedure that someone that's investigating the suspect of a crime looks them up on cafe?
Are you asking if he did?
I'm asking the standard operating. In other words, is that the procedure that the Longwood Police Department would have or should have?
There's nothing that's written that says you have to do that or supposed to do that. No, I mean, if you're asking standard procedure, then that would be
right.
Something that would be documented as this is what you
do. If a field officer brought you a complaint from an individual and asked you to investigate the crime, and they didn't look at the person, verify that that's actually who they are, look at their driver's license. I assume it has a picture of the driver's license. I've seen the reports before. If they didn't do that, would you be taken back? Would you think that they don't even know who this guy is? I mean, how do you find out who the guy is if you don't look him up?
I don't know what he used to identify your personal information to document it in the report.
But what I'm saying is it would have been one of those, it would have been something he has access to. He wouldn't have gone to his own personal something or other. He would have used the Longwood Police Department's resources.
I'm going to object for you asking Detective Patrick what Mr. Unsinger did. I know you're asking a lot of standard procedure, and I'm also going to ask Mr. Boling if you could, when you clarify, because those systems are all very different from cafe, and because David would pull up their driver's license photo.
Correct. Well,
and just for clarification, and you can add more information, but if cafe is more like your report writing, you input information.
Yes.
And then you said you can also look up wants and warrants. That's a completely different system.
Totally different system.
the wants and warrants, what's the name of the system that they use?
Well, that would be NCIC, FCIC.
Okay. What I'm trying to get at, because maybe I'm not articulating it, is when Mrs. Klein came in and she said to Brandon Unsinger, Roderic Boling is this guy that did this thing. He would have, normal procedure, would have gone and said, Roderic Boling, let's see who this person is.
Now, I'm going to object that you're asking Detective Patrick what Officer Unsinger did.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm sorry, you can answer that. I believe you've answered that, but now we're getting a little bit repetitive.
What I was trying to get at is if a person that took a complaint and filled out the complaint and then moved it on to you to investigate, if you realized that person did not do any sort of identity verification, didn't pull him up, didn't see what his criminal history was, didn't do any of that, would you feel that the person had adequately done their job before they passed it on to you for an investigation?
Are you asking him if the officer identified you?
No, ma'am. I'm asking him is if any officer took a complaint from a consumer and wrote down a person's name and information, and that officer passed a report to him, when he got the report, if he realized that the person had done no background check, no arrest history, no anything, would he find that to be an inadequate preparation to be investigating a person? That's what I was asking. What would you do? Would you call a guy and be like, hey, who is this guy? What is this guy? Do you know anything about him? And he just went, no, I just wrote his name down and passed it on to you for an investigation.
I don't know how he got your information, but obviously it was on the report when I received it. So Ms. Klein was able to provide likely your name, and that's probably about it. She would not have your address or your date of birth. So
Yes,
he
sir.
would have needed to obtain that information through some means. I don't know by what means he did that, but when the report got to me, it had your biographical information on it already.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer?
Yes, sir. Which would that lend you to assume that he did do some sort of check?
Yes.
Because it was filled out, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you. I asked you in our interview, and I'm quoting, did you read the whole Florida Bar report? Do you recall me asking you that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall what your response was?
I don't recall what my response was.
Your response was that you had read a small portion of it,
Yes.
the summary, the bar, the referees.
I know that I didn't read the entire thing, yes.
Okay.
I don't recall what my response was, but I know that I didn't read the entire thing. It was quite lengthy.
It was. It was quite like, I agree. Would you consider that Florida Bar report evidence related to the alleged crime?
It would establish the fact that you're not a licensed attorney. Outside of that, there was other things in there that would not pertain to the criminal side of this case.
Okay. And I'm not trying to be rhetorical or I'll say respectfully, how would you know what was in it if you didn't read it?
I read a portion of it, and like I said, I didn't.
Okay.
There was a lot in there that didn't apply to the criminal side of this case. So
Would it surprise you if I said that there was a lot in it that did apply to the criminal case?
no, I wouldn't know that.
Okay. To this day, have you read the report?
No.
Okay. If someone provides you with a compilation of evidence, is it common for you to read small portions of it and not read the remaining portions of it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say common. No.
Okay. As you can obviously see what I'm getting at, which is there was a pile of an investigation that had been conducted by the Florida Bar for 18 months. Very comprehensive investigation. And that comprehensive investigation surrounded Jonathan Bull, Sandra Lentz, Thomas McGill, Liberty Law, and the taking of retainers from consumers and the failure to perform on behalf of those consumers. That's what the Florida Bar found him guilty of. That's what the investigation revolved around. So 18-month compilation of investigation by the Florida Bar, to me, and I'm asking you, to you, is that relevant evidence if someone's being charged with being at Liberty Law, the place was investigated, with Sandra Lentz and Thomas McGill, who were part of the bar's investigation, and Jonathan Bull, who was part of the bar's investigation?
Right.
Right. Would you consider that relevant evidence to the crime? Because that's exactly what the crime that it's being alleged I committed.
Yes. It didn't. I don't believe that bar report addressed this specific incident. And I could be wrong.
That was my next question. Would it surprise you if it specifically addressed this incident?
I'm not aware of it.
Do you think having that information at the time before you issued the probable cause affidavit would have affected your decision to issue the probable cause affidavit?
I don't know.
Okay. Mrs. Klein filed her complaint February 16th of 2018. Do you have any information or recall when you began your investigation, when it was turned over to you and you began the investigatory process?
I don't recall, but I'll see if it's in
Or is there maybe a procedural time process where Officer Unsinger would have filled it out and then it goes, is there like a process? It goes to you and within a week you get it or a month you get it or?
Yeah, typically once the report has been completed by patrol, then my supervisor would review those reports and assign them
To whoever maybe.
whichever detective is.
And at the outside, do you recall or do you know procedural wise how long that may approximately take? And I'm not trying to be a stickler about it. Could it be, does it typically happen within 30 days or 60 days or 9 days or a year?
Within a week.
Within a week, okay. And I genuinely was only asking for approximation. So you may have received, that was February 16th, 2018, you may have or most probably would have received it before March 1st, let's say, 2 weeks later.
I don't know, and I don't see it on here, the exact
Yeah,
date.
I couldn't find it. I looked. Is it fair to assume that you would have received it before March 1st or sometime during the month of March? Within 6 weeks of the complaint being filed?
Yes,
Okay.
I would have received.
I'm just trying to work with a fair time frame that, you know, again, I'm not, that doesn't make or break the case. Within those bar materials, I don't know which parts you did and which parts you didn't do. Were you aware that contained within those bar materials was a complaint that Jonathan Bull had filed against Sandra Lentz and Thomas McGill for the unlicensed practice of law?
I was not aware of that.
Okay. January 18th of 2017, Jonathan Bull signed a sworn affidavit, which is already part of evidence in part of some of the motions I filed. And he accused...
Actually, just to clarify, the motions that I've received from you, you've never attached the UPL complaint. It says see attached exhibit, and that's actually one of my motions that I responded to. And again, as part of this deposition, when you refer to other items, you have to attach the exhibits.
Okay, thank you.
So I do not have your full, I believe, because in some of your motions you refer specifically to page numbers
Yes,
and
ma'am.
direct quotes. I have not received that UPL complaint, and when I've called and talked to the bar, those complaints are only held or retained as records for 1 year, which at the time of when all this occurred. So
Detective,
as part of my state's question,
yes,
we have the short version, the referee report, but not the full testimony of everything that you, in your previous motions, referred to.
yes, ma'am.
Do not have.
Did you, it's a great question. You had the Florida Bar Report, the full Florida Bar Report. Did you forward that to the state attorney's office as evidence in support of the
That's what I'm saying.
allegations?
What we have is the referee report, not the entire the hearing.
There were, to clarify for you, there were a couple of depositions that Jonathan Bull took under oath. There was sworn affidavits that Jonathan Bull filled out January 18th of 2017. He filled out another sworn affidavit on January 8th, I believe.
But if you're
February 8th, 2018.
But you're referring to items that you have, one, not disclosed to the state, and two, the only thing that the state has is the report of referee.
Okay, so
when you're referring to the UPL complaint,
that Jonathan Bull filed against
it's,
Sandra Lentz and Thomas
the
McGill,
state has the report of referee.
but the state never requested from the bar during their investigation or any time during this case the complaint that Jonathan Bull made against Sandra Lentz and Thomas McGill.
The Florida bar only retains those records for 1 year.
Okay.
But I'm saying this is
The
part.
oh, I'm
state
sorry.
Filed a motion to compel.
The
It's
white
not been heard,
the-
but in all your motions, when you refer to that complaint, it's never been filed. And actually, I think in
Sa-
one
Sa-
of the emails, when I asked for that copy, you told me to go get it myself.
Sa-
And the bar doesn't keep them for over a year, but
Sandra Lentz provided you with a volume when she did her proffer, a book, inside a big white book. Her attorney did, she did, or her attorney did. when she did her proffer, it's contained within that book. That was part of the defense's compilation of all of those documents. The book's about 2.5 inches thick, and it has an amazing amount of information in it. Why previous counsel for, well, I know why, didn't present it to you is perplexing at best.
I apologize for getting off.
Sorry, that's okay. So the complaint that Jonathan Bull filed against Thomas McGill and Thomas McGill and Sandra Lentz, he laid out on January 18th of 2017, 90 days after the alleged crime occurred. He laid out an accusation of the unlicensed practice of law against Thomas McGill and Sandra Lentz in depth, very comprehensive, lengthy statement where he described the Mrs. Klein incident specifically. And he made his claim about that. He filed it to the Florida Bar. The Florida Bar investigated, and the Florida Bar found no cause and that they had not committed the unlicensed practice of law. Meaning the Florida Bar had used its resources. They understand what the unlicensed practice of law is. They reviewed the facts alleged by Jonathan Bull, alleging that Tom McGill and Sandra Lentz on November 2nd took Mrs. Klein's retainer, and he claimed that they committed UPL, and the bar said that they didn't. Had you known that information, would that have affected or impacted your perspective on whether or not that this crime had been committed? Knowing that the Florida Bar had already conducted an investigation into the unlicensed practice of the law by 2 of the co-defendants for the same date, the same person, the same allegations, and they had found that there was no UPL that occurred.
I don't know the details of...
Well, as I said to you during our interview, if in fact what I just stated is true, and it's true because there's the documents, we have the documents to support it. Had you been privy to that information, would that have changed your perspective, knowing that the Florida Bar investigated Lentz and McGill under a claim from the attorney that they had taken retainers, the exact same claim, that they had taken a retainer from Mrs. Klein while he wasn't there and committed UPL? And the bar said, no, they didn't. How could that have not impacted you? I mean, you're a smart guy. I mean, you're an investigator.
I'm going to object. You're getting hostile.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Argumentative.
I apologize. I should just say, would that have given you a different perspective, or would that have changed your belief that the crime that was alleged had been committed?
You're asking me to predict how I would have acted for an incident that I'm not familiar with, so
Okay.
I don't know what you...
That's fair. What I'm getting at is the Florida Bar information had a lot of information that would have given you it was a tremendous amount of evidence. Had that evidence been gone through and weighed, and you knew that another enforcement agency had already investigated exactly what you were investigating and found that there was no crime.
Objection. The UPL complaint that's submitted to the bar is not a criminal offense. It's all civil. That is...
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm trying to be respectful, and that's what makes this difficult. But the criminal charges and UPL with the bar are separate and apart. And like you've already gone and stated beforehand, Mr. McGill and Ms. Lentz was working for Attorney Bull under his direction, which is separate and apart, which I know is part of your motion that you feel that count 2 should be with the Florida Bar. However, there's a difference in the fact that you are criminally charged with unlicensed practice of law versus Mr. McGill and Ms. Lentz not being charged with unlicensed practice of law.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that.
I don't want to, I want you to do your deposition the way you want.
Thank you.
So I understand your question of asking him, did you have this information, did you not?
Right.
But understand that the UPL complaint and all that, that is a civil procedure.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you said the crimes, and this is different.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry, I will.
No, I appreciate the input. You know, whatever people think that I'm hypersensitive, it just may be my personality. I appreciate the input. I genuinely do.
It's just we're walking a very fine line where I know even at one point we approached the bench and you have a lot of background information.
Yes, ma'am.
And you talked to Judge Nelson when we were originally talking about the depositions, and even Judge Nelson had stated the issue about how some of that's not relevant to this case.
Yes, ma'am.
But since we're in a deposition, and I understand the rules are a little bit more liberal. And I apologize sincerely, maybe I was not articulating I don't mean, I should not have related it to a crime. What I'm saying is that whether it's civil or whether it's criminal, and I understand there's a huge distinction, is it's the same incident involving the same people, involving the same fact pattern. So if someone had investigated the people, the incident, and the fact pattern, and the victim, do you believe, as an investigator, that investigatory material would have been relevant in your decision to do whatever you did, even if you still charged? Do you think it would have been relevant to have had read it or had access to it? That's my question. Maybe is that phrased better, Ms. Sacco? I mean, more appropriately? A little, but
Okay.
like I said,
I'm trying.
Do your I know.
I mean, I'm genuinely trying. As an investigator, the more information that's true and facts, the better. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. So access to information, adages, information's power. The more information you have as an investigator of anything surrounding a crime allows you to make a more objective decision about whether a crime was committed or wasn't committed, who was involved and who wasn't involved. Is that fair?
Yes.
I know it sounds like common sense, and what I was getting at is, had you been given or able to review that information, would you have found it beneficial in your decision making, whatever that decision making would have been? That was my question. Sorry. Do you train other detectives? Do they train detectives, or do they just kind of?
No.
Okay. I don't know if there was like a detective mentoring program or a training program or.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your response.
No.
During our interview, I referred to Attorney Bull's secretary, Nicole Anderson. Were you aware that she also provided a sworn affidavit in support of Jonathan Bull's complaint against McGill and Lentz?
I don't recall.
Okay. She did. I didn't know. Do you recall approximately or when the first time you spoke with Jonathan Bull over the phone to take his statement about the crime?
I documented it. So I don't recall the date.
I recall you saying that you had spoken to Jonathan Bull over the telephone, and you had explained that you had on the
Yes, I do.
during the interview. Are those phone calls typically recorded? Witness interviews?
Typically, yes.
Okay. Do you know if that one was?
Yes, that was.
And does it show the date?
I'm simply looking at a property
Okay.
submission, so it doesn't show the date on it.
But it has a recording of Jonathan Bull?
Yes.
Interview?
Yes.
Do you know if that was provided to the state?
It was provided in supplemental discovery on February 26, 2020, one CD tag TP5 recorded telephone call with Jonathan Bull.
Okay, I received that one. I believe that call occurred in, after the arrest. That would be, I believe that call occurred sometime in November of 2019. And I have received that, thank you. But prior to that, that would have been some 4 months after the arrest. Do you recall if you spoke to Jonathan Bull and interviewed John Bull, took a statement, anything from him prior to the issuance of the probable cause affidavit?
My recollection is the only one and only time I spoke with him was that the time that submitted.
Okay, so my question would be, it was alleged that I had impersonated, obviously we read the report, it was alleged that I had impersonated Jonathan Bull in his office and collected or attempted to or committed the act of theft in his office. Would it have been, do you feel like it should have been necessary to speak to Mr. Bull prior to issuing a probable cause affidavit to have me arrested for impersonating him? What if you spoke to him and he just said, oh no, he didn't impersonate me, he was my client?
It's my understanding that Mr. Bull was not present during the incident. So, I mean, I made attempts to make contact with Mr. Bull, both him and almost everybody in this case was extremely hard to get in contact with.
Okay. So do you feel like, did you get the impression he was avoiding you or just?
I don't know.
Okay, the entire time from the date of the filing of January 16th, 2018, Jonathan Bull participated in numerous Florida bar proceedings and numerous under oath sworn statements, all kinds of stuff. But y'all didn't have a chance to interview him anytime during the year of 2018 or 2019?
I'm not part of what the bar had going on. Didn't know that they even had anything going on with Mr. Bull at that time. It's not like I communicate with the bar association and
I understand.
tell me that they're doing an investigation.
Right. Well, that makes sense. But if the person that was alleging that he was impersonated was under investigation by the Florida bar, would that evidence have been relevant to you?
I don't know.
Okay. I was just curious. Are you now, as we sit here now, are you aware of the generalized allegations that were made against Attorney Bull?
No.
In general, the allegations were that he had accepted retainers from clients. Then he had failed to represent those clients, and they had filed complaints against him for doing that. That's what the general, and they found him guilty of virtually everything that they charged him with. The documents are obviously, you guys have the documents. The reason that I say that is because leading up to the alleged date, November 2nd, that I spoke with Ms. Klein, Jonathan Bull had previously been accused by other clients, other people that hired Liberty Law, of accepting retainers through his employees and then doing nothing for them. That sounds similar to what happened or is alleged to have happened in my case. So what I'm asking is, had you been privy to that information, that he had a history of having his employees accept retainers from clients and then him just doing nothing for them or close to nothing for them? Would that have made you a little suspect, maybe, that could have happened again in this incident? The guy was already under investigation for doing it 6 times.
I'm sorry, you lost me in all of that. Was there a question in there somewhere?
Had you known that John Bull was under investigation by the Florida Bar for taking retainers from clients and not performing, would that have I don't know what the words is, giving you a different perspective when you were thinking someone committed a crime? Especially if the crime was exactly what he had already been accused of. When you said you didn't speak to Jonathan Bull, I said, I mean, wouldn't he have been an important person? You responded, he wasn't there. Well, he didn't have to be there to know that he had instructed his employees to take a retainer. Because he does it, because he has a history of doing it. That's what I was getting at. He has a documented history of doing it. So a person has a documented history of not being present at their law firm and telling their employees, take a retainer from Mrs. Jones, knowing that documented history, would that have been relevant evidence to you when you made your decision on whether or not a crime had occurred? That's what I'm asking.
You're asking me to speculate, I guess, there, but I wasn't investigating Jonathan Bull. He was never alleged to have been there during the incident, so I didn't look into whether or not he had been previously investigated for the same offense.
Okay, fair enough. But you didn't get a chance to speak to Thomas McGill during your investigation, and you didn't get a chance to speak to Mrs. Lentz during the investigation, and obviously you didn't get a chance to speak to me during the investigation. Each of us would have very quickly offered the information to you that it was the same thing we've said since day one, that it was Jonathan Bull that instructed Ms. Lentz to accept Mrs. Klein's retainer. Were you given that information, would that have led you to investigate whether or not that had happened before?
I'm going to object. I understand, okay, Mr. Boling, that you feel that is your defense.
No.
However, that is not the allegations that are presented by Ms. Klein, for which all of you guys were charged.
Okay, then I'll ask it in a generic sense. As an investigator, if you have information that a person that has involvement, whether it be a victim of a crime or a perpetrator of a crime, if you have information that shows a pattern of behavior on one of the parties, would you find that would you recognize that as relevant information during your investigation?
Would it make a determination in whether they were guilty for this? No. It may be.
Well, I don't even mean in this case. I mean in general. If somebody has a modus operandi and an established history of a particular behavior, does knowing that and having that evidence in front of you from a body, not an individual making a statement, from an investigatory body, would you consider that relevant evidence to your investigation?
It could be.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for rephrasing, Mr. Boling.
I'm trying, and sincerely, I don't mind being corrected or stopped, or because I don't know obviously the procedure properly. So I appreciate it when you do it, because it just helps me improve.
You're fair game in most of your questions. It's just when you're making the comparison to what occurred on this date with what happened with the UPL it's just very different. The only reason I say that is from like a criminal perspective. So when you ask it with that specific comparison, I feel that's a little bit more like speculation on Detective Patrick's part.
Understood.
So if you were to ask him but the general question of if someone has a pattern of behavior, and if you specifically refer to a modus operandi, for instance, somebody who only burglarizes 7-Elevens and wears a red ski mask with a orange sticker
Right.
on it.
Definable behavior, yes.
That in a criminal perspective, modus operandi is true. However, in a civil world of collecting monies and not doing something doesn't necessarily equate to a criminal case.
Yes, ma'am.
So I appreciate the more generalized.
I will try to create the proper analogies so I don't go over that line there. Nicole Anderson, did you have an opportunity to interview her speak to her on the phone?
I don't recall if I spoke with her.
Okay. Are you familiar with what her position in the whole hierarchy thing is?
Secretary?
Yes, sir. She's Jonathan Bull's secretary. When Jonathan Bull left Liberty Law, she left with him and he went to the public defender's office. And at the public defender's office, she was also his secretary there. So when he separated with Liberty Law, she went with him. That just to give you a little background. Nicole Anderson, she provided a sworn affidavit. I don't want to assume. Have you had an opportunity to read her sworn affidavit from January 17th or January 18th, 2017?
I don't recall reading it.
Okay. She gave us a sworn statement detailing the unlicensed practice of law, alleged unlicensed practice of law by Lentz and McGill, and described the Laura Klein event. The reason I bring that up is because in describing that whole event, she never mentioned that I was involved at all under any circumstances. I don't know if you find that relevant now or not, but I find that relevant.
I didn't read the statement.
So. Okay, that's okay. She then gave another, I assume since you haven't seen that one, she gave another sworn affidavit on February 8th, 2018. And she gave that sworn affidavit in support of another affidavit given by Jonathan Bull in response to the Florida Bar's claim, or in response to a complaint filed by Mrs. Klein against Jonathan Bull. Have you had an opportunity to read that one?
No.
Okay. So you wouldn't know whether the information between the two affidavits conflict, tell a different story or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay, fair enough. Have you had an opportunity to review any of Nicole Anderson's testimony?
No.
And none of John Bull's testimony?
No.
Or his depositions?
No.
Okay. Would it surprise you? Am I allowed to ask the question? Would it surprise you? Yeah, I think so. You're the person to investigate the case. Would it surprise you if I told you that Jonathan Bull was aware as of November and December of 2016, within 30 days of the alleged event, that Mrs. Klein had come into his law office, that she had spoken with Tom and Sandy, that she had paid a retainer into his operating account, and that she had given case paperwork, to Nicole Anderson and a contract?
I was not aware of that.
So Jonathan Bull's knowledge of Mrs. Klein coming in, Mrs. Klein meeting someone, whether it be Tom and Sandy or me, or everyone, that she had provided a credit card, that she had filled out a contract, and that she had given documents in support of what she had hired Liberty Law for, that he was fully aware of that. And the reason I say fully aware of that, as an investigator, when you spoke to Jonathan Bull, did he give you any information as to when he became aware that someone had, quote, impersonated him? Did he tell you when the first time he became aware of it?
I don't recall.
Okay. I'll leave that for trial. Okay, during our interview, Detective Arciola was present. Do you recall me discussing with him a investigation that he was involved in that involved Liberty Law with a lady named Rebecca Cyphers?
I don't specifically remember the conversation that you had, no.
Okay, I asked him if he, and you, let's do it, it's on the tape. I asked him if he opened and had conducted a criminal investigation into Liberty Law, into Jonathan Bull, Sandra Lentz, and Thomas McGill, and Nicole Anderson. If he had opened an investigation and conducted an investigation into alleged crimes of theft against Liberty Law and those people. And he said he had, but his quote was, "I couldn't get anybody to talk to me about it." That's what he responded on the tape. You can listen to the tape. I have requested that the facts and the information surrounding that case, the investigatory materials, and I have yet to receive them from the Longwood Police Department. Are you aware of any reason why I would not be able to receive those?
No, I have no idea.
I've requested them through Freedom of Information Acts, and they have not been provided. I've requested them through discovery, and they haven't been sent. Has anyone ever asked you for them?
No.
State Attorney's Office has never requested them from you?
You're referring to the Rebecca Cyphers case?
Well, I'm referring to a criminal complaint filed against Liberty Law for theft of some close to $100,000 from a client.
I don't deal with
So
Rebecca.
was that the first time you've heard of that? Me bringing it up is the first time you've heard of it?
I've heard the name Rebecca Cyphers before, yes.
No, I meant the event of Rebecca. You're right. Her claiming that there was a
I've
$100,000.
heard Rebecca Cyphers from that event,
Okay.
but
Do
I
you
don't have any,
familiarity with the facts?
no.
Okay. I'll ask Detective Arciola that. So, and is Detective Arciola and you, as far as a pecking order, is there a pecking order? Is a detective, or are you like a senior detective, or how does that work? Detective. Okay, fair enough. Did you assist Detective Arciola in any part of the investigation of Rebecca Cyphers or Liberty Law related to that particular complaint or case?
No.
Okay. So you were aware of the investigation. Were you aware of the investigation when it was ongoing, or were you aware of it when I first brought it up when Detective Arciola was sitting there?
No, that case had been closed by the time that I was
Okay.
aware of it.
Okay. When I asked you about the date on the probable cause affidavit being the wrong date and the wrong year that the crime was allegedly committed, do you recall what you responded?
Not my exact words, but
Something to the effect of, quote, "I may have got a date wrong because I cut and paste information when I'm summarizing multiple reports."
that sounds accurate.
Okay. In the case with this probable cause affidavit, in this case, were you summarizing multiple reports?
Well, I was taking information from multiple narratives.
Multiple narratives, multiple sources?
Yes.
Okay. And I asked you, given the information that I'd covered with you, do you think, knowing what you had known, that you still would have filed a probable cause affidavit? Because I believed I had supplemented a lot of information that you were unaware of. And your response was, when I have a victim claiming a crime, it doesn't matter whether it's February or November. If a victim states I went in there and he said he was John Bull, then I'm sending it to the state attorney. Quote. You can verify that quote, but that's quote.
It sounds like you're reading the exact quote.
I am. I'm reading the exact quote. Yeah. If I have a victim claiming a crime, it doesn't matter whether it's February or November. If a victim states I went in there and he said it was John Bull, then I'm sending it to the state attorney. So my question is, when you sent over the probable cause affidavit to the state's attorney's office, it alleged that Mrs. Klein walked into Liberty Law on February 16th, 2018. You sent the probable cause affidavit over to the state's attorney's office on December 12th, 2018. So not long. I mean, it's 10 months later, you had to do an investigation, I assume. If Ms. Klein walked into Liberty Law on February 16th, 2018, that's not a lot of delay between the time she walked into Liberty Law, reported the crime, you investigated it, and sent it to probable cause evidence.
Correct.
If in fact she walked into Liberty Law on November 2nd of 2016, that's 15 months prior to her ever reporting the crime. 15 months prior to her ever reporting the crime. Do you think that when you sent over the information in the probable cause affidavit, had the state attorney's office seen that there was a huge disparity in time where nothing was done, that it would have affected their decision to charge? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Typically, when somebody commits a crime, the crime gets reported unless the crime is unknown, right?
Right.
But Mrs. Klein waited 14, 15 months before ever going into the Longwood Police Department to meet with, investigator or Officer Unsinger.
Mm-hmm.
Through your investigation, was that one of the questions that you had for Mrs. Klein, is what caused the 15-month delay? Did you ever go back? Did you ask her if she ever went back to Liberty Law even one time to talk to Jonathan Bull or see what happened to her case or go over case information or anything?
I don't recall asking her that specific information.
Okay. Did you not find it odd at all that somebody would have retained a lawyer in November of 2016 and waited till February of 2018 to come in and make a complaint?
I think she explained that by her believing that some type of legal process was being done during that time frame.
When in fact no legal process was being done at all.
To her claim, yes.
Correct. Well, I'll support that. No legal process was being done, to my recollection, to my understanding. Based on the statement, when you have a victim claiming a crime and the person makes a statement that somebody did something to them, you send that to the state attorney's office. That was your response. Do you know why that Rebecca Cypher's complaint that she was defrauded out of in excess of $50,000? Do you know why that complaint was never sent to the state's attorney's office? Because you had a victim complaining that they had been the victim of a crime, and she provided a tremendous amount of very well documented evidence to support the allegations. Do you know why that wouldn't be sent to the state attorney's office?
I wasn't involved in that investigation, so I don't know the details of the case and why it wasn't sent to the state.
So the question would be, it isn't just you that when you have a victim claiming a crime, it goes to the state attorney's office. Is that a police policy?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a policy. It's just the way that.
Right. What I'm trying to figure out is the disparity. Mrs. Klein came in to the Longwood Police Department 15 months after a crime had occurred, according to her, and said $2,000 was taken from me under these pretenses. That got sent up as a criminal referral, or whatever we call it. Rebecca Cyphers came in within 2 weeks of alleging that a crime had been committed to the same Longwood Police Department. She provided a substantial amount of documentary evidence from banks, bank deposit slips, checks, etc., to the Longwood Police, complained that she had been defrauded by Jonathan Bull, Sandra Lentz, Thomas McGill, and Nicole Anderson out of that money. And that information was never sent to the state attorney's office. What I'm asking is, policy is policy, procedure is procedure. Would you see the disparity?
I'm going to object only mainly because Detective Patrick has stated several times he wasn't involved in
The investigation.
Rebecca Cyphers.
Okay.
So for instance, if they did not find probable cause or a criminal case, it wouldn't have come to the SAO, versus if it would have been civil and a contractual dispute, it would not come to the SAO.
Okay.
So based off his question of, I'm gonna say it would be speculation, and going back to where I feel sometimes the civil and criminal difference in the cases, if he wasn't involved in the investigation of whatever complaint Rebecca Cyphers made, he wouldn't necessarily be able to know, well, my objection is
right.
it's
I'll
been
rephrase
asked
it.
and answered that he stated he's not familiar with Rebecca Cyphers' complaint.
I'll rephrase it. Is there an expectation of uniformity between cases that have extraordinarily similar fact bases? That is there supposed to be a uniformity that people don't pick and choose which ones go? If they have two cases, exact same fact patterns, same everything.
Well, can I ask you this, Mr. Boling?
Yes, of course.
Since you seem to be familiar with Rebecca Cyphers' case.
Yes.
In Rebecca Cyphers' case, does she allege that you pretended to be Mr. Bull in assisting Lentz and McGill to obtain money for retainer?
No, ma'am. But she does allege that Lentz and Bull participated in unlicensed practice of law and committed theft against her. So whether it went civil or whether somebody elected to make it criminal, it was a choice, right? She made Rebecca Cyphers laid out the allegations, very lengthy allegations, police report, where she very articulate, nothing even close to as basic as Mrs. Klein's allegations. She laid them out, and they are well laid out.
But I'm gonna object that the question's been asked and answered based off the statement that
Yes, ma'am.
you didn't.
I'll move on.
But if you want to rephrase it, or if you have another question, I don't.
I was my main question was
But this is again when you
for the
say
disparity.
same.
Yeah, I say the same fact. I'm just saying is if he was investigating any case, not even forget this case, just any case that have identical or extraordinarily similar fact patterns, with is there a reason one would go up and the other one would go? So in other words, does somebody have a subjective? Are investigators allowed to make subjective decisions on who they do and who they don't want to prosecute?
No.
Right. So it's fact-based. Is that fair to say? It's just like Joe Friday, just facts, ma'am.
Yes.
If the facts lay out that a crime has been committed, then and there's evidence to support probable cause, then it goes to the state attorney's office.
Yes.
If somebody makes allegations and there's, so two of them that are factually extraordinarily similar with the same amount of evidence, it is not a subjective decision that a detective would make.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Did I phrase that better?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I am correctable. I will listen.
Well, again, because you're proceeding pro se, I don't want to come across. And I'm
You don't.
trying to-
You don't genuinely. You don't ever come across like that. So.
But again, it's your deposition, so again, it's very more broad, but to be specific about a fact pattern, I think there may be some disagreement of how similar the fact pattern is.
Okay. If extraneous of the deposition, if there's a time that I could provide you with that evidence, because I'm not sure that you've had an opportunity to review it, I think that you, being an intelligent woman, would see that the fact patterns are horrifyingly similar.
Well, just based off I don't want to.
You can say it.
Well, just, the main difference is that Mr. Bull and Ms. Klein, in the allegation is that you pretended to be Mr. Bull. And if you're saying in Ms. Rebecca Cyphers' complaint, you weren't present, then I feel that makes a very big difference in the fact pattern. But again, I don't want you to.
In Rebecca Cyphers' case, I was present at times because I was Jonathan Bull's client. I was his client for months during that period. So,
but you just stated Ms. Cyphers didn't accuse you of pretending to be
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bull.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
So that is a huge difference in the fact patterns.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But I do have two co-defendants, Sandra Lentz and Thomas McGill.
Who have entered into.
Yes, ma'am. And but my point being is they were accused by her of unlicensed practice of law, and I'm accused with them in the unlicensed practice of law. I assume because they enabled me to practice law without a license or something. I don't understand.
I
Yeah, that's okay.
can't direct you in that.
Right. I'll move on. Thanks. I asked you if you had why you hadn't reached out to speak to me prior to filing the probable cause affidavit, and your response was that you couldn't find me. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever just pull up my license and look at the address on it?
Yes, I went by the address that I had.
Okay, the address that I had on my license for the previous 18 months prior to my arrest was 3408 Fox Meadow Court, Longwood, Florida 32779. That's from the Department of Motor Vehicles. So,
The address that I had was 1707 Bridgewater Drive, Heathrow.
yes, sir. I had not resided at that address since November of 2016. So, November 2016, I was arrested, or I was investigated, I'm assuming beginning January or February 16th of 2018. The entire time during your investigation, my driver's license listed my address as the place that I lived, which was 3408 Fox Meadow Court. So at no time during the time that you were investigating me did my driver's license reflect an address different, because the address that I had on my driver's license after 1707 Bridgewater Drive was 853 Eagle Claw Court, and I had that for the entire year of 2007, December of 2016, all of 2017, until the beginning of 2018, which what I'm getting at is that had you looked up my driver's license to find me in 2017 or 2018, it would not have been the Bridgewater address. So that's why one of the reasons I was asking about Brandon Unsinger, when they look somebody up, don't they at least look at their driver's license or look at who they are? I also had been corresponding with the Longwood Police Department personally, and had been physically been in the Longwood Police Department on several occasions requesting documents for a civil suit against the Longwood Police Department. And they had on file my email address, my physical address where they mailed, which is the 3408 Fox Meadow Court address, where they mailed all my mail to for the Chapter 119 documents that I had requested. So how no one could find me, had they wanted to find me, is what I'm asking. How could it have been that difficult to find me?
All I can say is that's the address I had, that's the address I went to.
And that's the address that Mr. Unsinger provided you? Was that
That's the address that was on the report. I'm not sure what source he used to get that address.
Okay. You stated that when I spoke to you that you had tried to locate Sandra Lentz and Thomas McGill and were unable to locate them also.
Correct.
Okay. During the period of time that you were investigating, were you aware that they still worked at that Liberty Law office 100 yards away from the Longwood Police Department?
I was not aware.
Did you know where Liberty Law was located?
Yes.
Okay. Thomas McGill, just for the record, Thomas McGill and Sandra Lentz occupied that even throughout the last couple of years, but all through the investigation, through the bar investigation, that office they occupied, it was no longer called Liberty Law, but that was the same physical address, the one right across from the Longwood Police Department.
Yes.
Okay.
I assume.
It was. Even as the day of our arrest, they were still, and the year after our arrest, they were still there. So what I'm asking is, if Brandon Unsinger When Laura Klein came in and made the original complaint, did she make the original complaint just against Roderic Boling, or did she make it against Roderic Boling, Sandra Lentz, and Thomas McGill? Do you know?
Against all three, I believe.
Against all three?
Yes.
Because that you said that's when you began investigating all three.
Yes.
Okay. And what I was saying is, from that moment forward, that was their physical office where they were at on a daily basis, 100 yards from the Longwood Police Department.
I don't know.
Okay. When I got to the interview, I asked you if you were going to be recording the interview. Do you recall that?
I don't recall.
Okay. You did. I asked you if you were going to recall, and you don't recall your response?
I don't recall my response.
You said that you were not going to be recording the interview, but you were going to be taking notes during the interview.
I don't recall saying that.
Okay. Do you know where those notes went that you took while I was there?
I don't recall taking notes.
Okay. So if you weren't going to record it and you weren't taking notes, is that standard procedure when a defendant who waives their right to counsel comes in for an interview wouldn't it be important to document that interview? But if the guy just says, yeah, I did it, and then later goes, oh, I didn't say that. Wouldn't it be important to document that interview?
Well, obviously, I knew I was recording the interview.
Okay. Was the point that I didn't?
I was telling you that I wasn't going to.
Okay.
I'm just standing, sorry.
Okay. And your device only recorded a portion of the interview.
Yes.
It cut off at the 47-minute mark. Do
Yes.
you remember why?
Battery went dead.
Okay. But you have had a chance to review the entire recording, including what transpired after the 47-minute mark. Have you heard my full recording?
No.
So you probably wouldn't know what exactly the 47-minute mark was. You know what I'm saying? So you wouldn't know when
I
it
don't
stopped.
believe I have it, Mr. Boling, because you filed a motion to the court saying you wanted it to be heard ex parte with the judge before sending over. And
no,
because you stated there was confidential information on there.
There is, but I did provide it to you in the discovery. Obviously I can send it to you again, but I sent you the e-file, and then the judge made sure of that in the March hearing that we had in March. I sent you over my file of it. I also sent the audio recording to both other defense counsels the day after, 2 days after. After the 47-minute mark, I asked you a couple of what I would think were pretty relevant questions. I asked you, do you recall, or I said to you, not all the information that I've gone over with you, I'm summarizing. I'll say quote when I'm not. All of this information, had you known at the time of the PCA, just the information that we covered today, would it have given you a different perspective on whether or not you thought I was involved in the crime? That was my general question to you. And you said, if I have a crime, I have a crime. I set up the state attorney's office, we just reviewed that. And you said, this isn't something that I can fix now. That was quote. You said, it's not something I can fix. And I said, okay, well, what are you going to do with all the information that I've provided to you? And your statement was, quote, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this information and deliver it to the state attorney. My question is, did you do that?
I don't recall what you provided me other than a audio interview, of course, which was provided to the state, yes.
Well, the information contained in it, but the stuff that you and I went over.
The interview itself, is that what you're referring to? Did you provide
yes.
the documents? I don't recall.
Yes, I did. But I also provided information that you had said on the tape that you were not privy to. So I understand the tape is information, but when I said, oh, did you know that this, did you know that, did you know, then you said, no, I didn't, I wasn't aware of that, I wasn't aware of the bar report, I wasn't aware of the stuff that I went over in the interview. And I said, now that you're aware of all that, right, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And you said, I can't fix it now. right? You're like, which I understand. It's not your position to be fixing something or not fixing something. What I was saying was, before the state makes a charging decision, which we know that they make charging decision, that if you were to take the information that I gave you, assuming that it was true, which I'm sure as an investigator you wouldn't assume it's true, you would have to assume it's probably not true. Therefore, you would investigate it because it's a lot of exculpatory information that would give you a completely different perspective. Does that make sense? If somebody gives you an alibi, do you go investigate the alibi?
You should.
Okay. I gave you an alibi. That's what I gave you during that interview. I gave you an alibi, information, documents, where to find them, who to go, what to read. I gave you all that information in hopes that you could provide that to the state attorney's office so they wouldn't just get a probable cause affidavit that says I committed a crime with no rebuttal, or because I knew to myself, I believed, that if you investigated what I told you, you would have a completely different perspective on what had occurred. That's what I was asking. So when I said, what do you do with this information? You said, I'm going to take it to the state attorney's office. I should probably make a clearer question. From the time that we had the interview and I provided you with the information, did you investigate any of that to verify whether it was true or was not true? Did you do any investigating at that point forward?
As far as what? Investigate what?
Whether or not the information that I provided you was true. I provided you information about me never working for Liberty Law, me never getting paid, any compensation, receiving anything, Jonathan Bull giving different statements under oath to contradict the statement he gave you, right? So one of the statements that Jonathan Bull gave you, that's in his written narrative, was that he closed his law office on October 13th, 2016.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
A handwritten statement by Attorney Bull, he actually submitted to the state attorney's office.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That did not go to Detective Patrick.
Okay, Jonathan Bull has alleged on different occasions, different things, but his allegation was that he had closed his law office on October 13th, 2016. Now, as an investigator, if somebody told me that, I'd be like, well, that makes sense. You closed your office. And then he said, I don't think I ever went back after that, which was strange. Which would, as an investigator, would make sense to me. That if the lawyer's gone, he's never going to come back, that somebody could sneak in and impersonate him, right? If in fact he did what he said, which was stop going there on October 13th. My point was that I had provided you information that showed that wasn't true. How do you only not stop going there? He was there the morning of November 2nd, the day that I was there to meet him. My hopes were that you were going to investigate that portion of that and be like, hey, this dude's been lying to me. Not me, John Bull. And be like, why would he lie about being there the day that Miss Klein came in? That's odd. Which to me was, I'm hoping that very, very rarely do you find a defendant that is begging somebody to just pick a case apart and get everybody under oath, put them on the stand and interrogate them. Very.
Mr. Boling, sorry, I'm gonna ask.
Yes, ma'am.
If you have a question.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Have you been contacted by the state's attorney's office regarding demands for discovery since 2020 for additional discovery, like stuff that you may not have provided that either I demanded or that they have asked for?
I don't recall.
Okay. Originally, you filled out the probable cause affidavit for the charge of organized scheme to defraud. And charged me with organized scheme to defraud. That was original probable cause affidavit for organized scheme to defraud, along with Lentz and McGill. Do you know Can you explain what the organized scheme was?
I would guess just say the actions that were taken that convinced the victim to hand over her money.
But that would be one incident. That's not an organized scheme under the statute. An isolated incident is not an organized scheme.
I'm gonna object,
Okay.
because the organized fraud can be one incident
Okay.
over a time period.
Okay.
But I'd also, well, never mind, I don't wanna interrupt your
No,
question.
that's fine. But originally you submitted a charge for organized fraud
Okay.
instead of grand theft. So obviously there was, for probable cause, there was a basis for which you thought I participated in an organized fraud. Do you recall what the basis for that was? Was it a singular incident, or did you have information that was information provided to the Longwood police that I had been participating as an ongoing, because the charging document says that I participated in organized fraud from November of 2016 until 2018.
Right.
That would be an ongoing act.
I only had information of the single incident, and that was based on the statement from Ms. Klein.
But no other ongoing behavior, no other continuing fraud?
No.
Had you ever been provided with any other information related to any other potential victims or witnesses that had alleged that they had met with me also and I had impersonated Jonathan Bull?
No.
Okay. Do you know who Mrs. Almassi is? Have you ever heard the name?
I don't recall.
Okay. So you never took a criminal complaint, or I never interviewed a lady named Miss Almassi for a criminal complaint in relation to Roderic Boling?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Would you know if Brandon Unsinger had?
I don't know.
Okay. So you may have heard the name, but it doesn't come to mind as if she was another victim.
I don't know.
Okay.
The name sounds familiar, but I don't know in what context.
Okay. So if a investigator has material information that is exculpatory or potentially exculpatory, and they exclude that from a probable cause affidavit, I'm sorry, scratch that. I'll rephrase the question. If, not specific to this case, but if a officer, an investigating officer or a detective or someone, in your experience, omits relevant information or material information from a probable cause affidavit or an arrest report or an incident report, the omission of information, would you consider that lying? Like willful omission?
I guess it could be
Okay.
said.
So if you're interviewing a suspect and the suspect fails to, he intentionally omits that he was at the beach the day that the incident occurred, would you consider that he lied to you or misrepresented the facts to you of what happened because he knew what you were asking and he willfully omitted the information to change your perspective?
Sure.
Okay, I'm just curious. So you don't know if Susan Almassi ever filed a criminal complaint or a complaint with the Longwood Police Department for any purpose related to anything?
I don't know.
Okay. When you spoke to Ms. Klein, Did Miss Klein tell you how she came about the information that Roderic Boling had impersonated Jonathan Bull? Did she explain where she got that information from?
I believe it's through the bar, the Florida bar.
That's correct. Did you call the Florida bar, interview anybody from the bar, or ask the Florida bar where they got that information from?
No.
Okay. When you said that she received that information through the Florida bar, did you add credibility to the information because it was from the Florida bar? The Florida bar told her that. Did you think, well, that's a credible source? Or did you think if she would have said, yeah, a buddy of mine told me that, would you have investigated her buddy?
Maybe would have interviewed the person.
The person, right. So when the Florida bar gave her the information, you didn't interview the Florida bar.
No.
And is the reason you didn't interview the Florida bar is because you added credibility to the Florida bar. You would think that they wouldn't be disseminating information that wasn't verified or wasn't true or wasn't accurate.
Yeah, I guess.
Does a state agency that is accountable, does information coming from them carry more credibility than just an average citizen in investigatory purposes, for investigatory
I
purposes?
guess you could say that, yeah.
I mean, I think that's fair. I would. Florida bar called me and said, we did an investigation and here's what we determined. I would be like, I don't think that happened, right? I would be like, it's the Florida bar. I'm not going to call and lie to somebody.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure we were on the same page. I know it's a common sense question. Since you haven't had an opportunity to read the Florida bar's statement regarding that, would it surprise you if I told you that the Florida bar got that information from Jonathan Bull? That Jonathan Bull is who provided the Florida bar investigator with the information that Roderic Boling had impersonated him?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, that's where it came from. We have that in a written document from the Florida bar. Jonathan Bull provided that information to the Florida bar. I assume that since you didn't know that, you wouldn't know that Jonathan Bull's statement to the Florida bar, where he got the information from. He got it from a previous client. So here's how Mrs. Klein learned that Roderic Boling allegedly impersonated Jonathan Bull. A previous client told Jonathan Bull,
Mr.
Roderic
Boling,
Boling
I'm gonna
impersonated.
ask if you can
Sure.
ask a specific
Okay.
question. And we are at 11:14. I know we started at 9:15.
I mean, if we can finish.
If you have one more
Well,
last question, because I
if-
also get an opportunity to ask questions and you've kind of taken that time away from me.
Okay. I mean, I'll get the next one and reschedule probable cause.
I mean, I'm happy to allow you if you want to. I'm just going by the time frame, and if you have any more questions.
Were you aware that the Florida bar called Mrs. Klein in relation to her complaint about Jonathan Bull? Did you read her complaint about her bar complaint against Jonathan Bull?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you think that would have been relevant to know what she actually claimed happened? Besides, what if she gave a different statement than she gave you, the Longwood Police Department?
Sure. Yeah.
She gave a sworn statement to the Florida bar, or she gave information to the Florida bar.
I believe she did provide that to us during the initial, when she made the initial report.
She provided you guys a copy of the Florida bar, her Florida bar complaint against Jonathan Bull?
Yeah, Klein's initial letter to Florida bar.
Okay, do you know why, did you provide that to the State's Attorney's Office in discovery?
Yeah, it should have been, yes.
Okay, I have never received it to the State's, we'll check and see if the State's Attorney's Office received it.
That would be,
Oh, I want to say I have a supplemental discovery.
evidence BU2.
Are you saying, Mr. Boling, that you've never received a copy of that letter?
I have not.
I know it went out in discovery.
I have for Ms. Tacko, I have an exceptionally detailed item by item with the filing number of every single piece of documents that I have received, all in a spreadsheet. And I know which ones that have actually now. I do know that there was discovery that was provided to opposing counsel, or to my co-defendant's counsel, that was not provided to me. For I don't know what the purposes were, and it may be legal. But there's a significant amount of discovery that has not been provided to me. That was
on the 20th day of September 2019.
okay.
And it went to roddyboling@gmail.com.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, it says a 2-page type statement of Laura Klein, 4-page letter from Brian Tenenbaum, 1-page affidavit of Nicole Anderson, and 15-page text messages.
Okay.
I believe it was a letter from Brian Tenenbaum that informed or asked Ms. Klein to identify who she met with that day.
Oh, it was.
Okay.
You are correct. And it was Brian Tannenbaum.
So, and Mr. Boling, having going through this, you're notating items that you're specifically referring to that you're saying you don't have in discovery. Of course, I would submit that they've been provided.
Right.
But please give
Thank
me
you.
a list of anything you feel you don't have copies of.
Okay, I will. Thank
I know
you.
we're in this age of digital, but I believe there was a hand copy of the original discovery that was given in court. Again, anything you feel you don't have.
Did Mrs. Klein tell you that it was the Florida bar, Jonathan Bull, and attorney Tannenbaum that encouraged, that provided a photo of me and said, and told her this guy was impersonating Jonathan Bull? Did she tell you that?
No,
She never said?
not that I recall, no.
Did she tell you that the day that she came into the office with her photographs of her house, that she was emotionally distraught, like very, very, very upset, crying during the time that she was at Jonathan Bull's office?
I vaguely remember her mentioning something about being distraught.
Yeah, she was. And that until she was told, did she tell you that until she was told by the Florida bar, Tannenbaum and John Bull, that Roderic Boling, a convicted felon, had been impersonating her in Jonathan Bull's office? She never mentioned to anyone that she had met with Jonathan Bull. Did she tell you that?
I don't recall anything like that.
Were you aware that it was attorney Tannenbaum, Bull, and Jonathan Bull, and another person? Or I'll just drop the other person since I won't name them. That encouraged her to go into the Longwood Police Department and file a criminal complaint against Roderic Boling?
No.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'll never get through this. I'll reset for another day. So if,
No, this is
oh, no,
one shot.
no, I'll have a hearing. I'll have a hearing on it. For them to restrict my ability to depose witnesses for my freedom, or that whole Judge Nelson thing, that's not going anywhere. I'll have that overturned in a heartbeat.
Okay, well, I mean, we've gone a little 5 minutes over. Do you have one more last question you want to wrap things up with, or do you want to go ahead and set that aside for your motion?
You filed the probable cause affidavit against me on December 12th, 2018. Did you notify anybody outside of your department that had been filed?
No.
Did anyone else in your department know that it had been filed? Would Unsinger know it was filed?
Unsinger would not have known. Once I file it, it goes to my supervisor, which
Okay.
would have been, trying to think back during that time.
Okay.
Possibly Lieutenant Bruce, who would notarize it, and then it goes on the records before it's sent.
Do you know why that you filed the probable cause affidavit against me in December of 18, but waited 5 more months to file the probable cause affidavit against Lentz and McGill?
I don't know.
The investigatory material that you accumulated between those times, do you know where all that material went?
I don't know that I was continuing the investigation during that time. I don't know.
Okay,
I've got lots of other cases that I work on as well.
gotcha. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Sacco.
I just want to make sure you feel like I've given you some extra time, because I know there's been a few interruptions.
No, you listen, you've been amazing. I appreciate your patience. Thank you very much. The judges who restricted the time, it wasn't you.
Is it your understanding that Ms. Klein presented to you and also did a photo lineup where she had identified Mr. Boling?
Yes,
And she stated it was when she became aware that she was not in fact talking to Attorney Bull, but was in fact talking with Mr. Boling?
correct.
And her allegations are that when she went to Liberty Law Firm and met with Mr. McGill, Ms. Lentz, and Mr. Boling, that he held himself out to be Attorney Bull?
That's how she anticipated that meeting to go.
I don't have any additional questions. Mr. Bull, at this point, Detective Patrick, would you like to read or waive if this gets transferred? Okay. And,
Okay, I got one last question. Did Mrs. Klein tell you that I said that I was Jonathan Bull, or that someone else introduced me as Jonathan Bull?
that you were introduced to her as Mr. Bull, and at no time did anybody correct that?
That's what she, because I've read two conflicting statements.
I don't recall. I'd have to look at
Okay.
her official statement to see.
Oh, that's right. You didn't interview her. I'm sorry. Or did you ever interview her personally?
I think the only time I met with her was during the photo lineup process.
Okay. And I've got a video that I saw that. Thank you.
Okay, just for the purposes of the record, I'm showing a time of, my phone says 11:24 a.m. concluding on this deposition of Detective Patrick in case number 2019-2068 CFC with Mr. Boling.
Thank you.